Hello, hello. Thank you all for joining us this morning. We're so excited to chat. I'm Christine Lopez, product leader at Human Security. With us, we've got David Cole, CEO of TrustX, Paul Bannister, Chief Strategy Officer at Raptive, and David Dworin, Chief Product Officer at Freewheel. So, man, we've been like talking about cookies, third-party cookie deprecation for, I don't know, the last 3 years. It's like the year of the non-cookie is the new year of the mobile. I'd like to take a little different approach today. Let's look at this in terms of, privacy, identity, security. Can they coexist? Do we have to give a little on one to, fulfill the needs, the requirements of the other? What gives? We'll have some time for questions at the end, but if you have, any burning questions, feel free to come up and take my mic and say, like, I'm gonna let you finish later. But I'll understand. But yeah, so let's kick it off. I'd love to start with asking these guys, David, Paul, David. Ooh, that would have been really nice. Can we change your name to David? That way I can just say, David, do you want to answer? And everyone can chime in. Awkward. Yeah, let's start with why are you excited to be here? Why is this an interesting, exciting thing for you to chat about, to chime in about, to have a conversation?
I'm excited to be here because the rosé is a little less expensive than the import tax. Is that good enough? Or you? Oh, you meant yeah. Why am I here to talk about privacy? I'm excited because I think we should all agree that we kind of screwed it up a little bit. We kind of made consumers feel like advertising a little creepy, and I think with the combination of new privacy regulation in the States, the enforcement of privacy regulation here in Europe, and the gradual but coming full deprecation of the third-party cookie, we have actually an opportunity to really make a material change to the way we do this whole thing. And I'm excited because I think it'll work better for all of us within the ecosystem and also for our relationship with consumers. So I'm just excited about that. To me, it's a big opportunity. And the rosé is cheaper.
I'd say that sometimes people talk about the end of cookies as the beginning of the end. And I almost think of it more of the end of the beginning. It's we're getting to a new phase, and the things that are happening now are rebuilding a lot of the way the world works, and what happens next year or whatever is really just the beginning. We're getting new things out there, building new technology, changing the way advertising works on the whole internet, which is pretty exciting. So for me, that's what it is. It's rebuilding the way things work in a better way that can work more for consumers.
Things are a little different for us at Freewheel because we've never had cookies in many of the environments we're working at. If you think about, the cookie, it's traditionally been a desktop or a browser-based system. That's, a single-digit percentage of the inventory we see in premium video, most of which is served on a television screen through a smart TV, a connected device, or a set-top box, none of which have had cookies, all of which have, best case scenario, have some kind of ID for advertising that does not often persist across apps or in the same way. And so we've been dealing with this cookieless environment and have thoughts about it really since the inception. This is the environment that we operate in. And we're excited to see the rest of the industry that has been operating in a cookie-driven world where the way that you define data is you sort of track people around the internet and profile them, and then you kind of impute who they are, start to adopt standards that's similar to what we've been doing in video for a long time. Because in video, we've had to develop other solutions, and unfortunately, because while we are, I think, a large part of sort of media buying and we're significant, most of the ad tech infrastructure wasn't built for this world. And so we've had to align and adapt because of that.
One of the cheesiest things, I bet you've heard it here this week, is oh, we got to get the right ad to the right user at the right time. like, this is why we need precision in targeting.
It's
This
a
is
lie.
Yeah, like, what a myth. Like, Paul, what are your thoughts on this?
I really dislike the word addressability. I feel like it creates this like mythology where like everything must be addressed, and like yes, there's some reality to it and whatever. We're not going to get rid of that word per se, but I do think it's like it I don't want to go back to the world of advertising in the 1960s or before that, where it's like totally like mass market and very untargeted. But like, how do we get to a world that's like actually better privacy? You can still reach the audiences you want. You can still measure what's going on, but like literally saying like it was mythology as well that like you really could ever have like a one-to-one conversation via advertising with a consumer. Like that wasn't happening anyway. So it's like let's like broaden what we're doing, the way we think about things, reaching an audience. How do you get the results you want from advertising? And it's not about that one-to-one. It's about making the dollar work and actually getting the goals you want.
Can I put I just want to like myth bust, because I totally agree with you, Paul. Two things that we think we've been getting that we just haven't. And we've got to, I think, in this room and when we go out and talk to our friends, change the mythology. The first off thing is that we got this belief that when you go buy third-party data and then do targeting with it, that you're getting the person you want to get. And that's just not true. The data is questionably accurate. The incentives in this industry are misaligned so that size gets bought but not quality. We all know that. So the largest data sets actually probably have the lowest quality to them, but everybody's buying them. The second part of the mythology is it costs a shit ton of money to attempt to get this level of precision that isn't precise. DSPs, you actually gave me a stat this morning. I want you to tell people the stat you gave me because it's astounding. DSPs charge 100% markup on data, which is already overpriced for its quality. And so if you're buying media, all this money is going to this super precise data that's not precise. And the third mythology is a more recent mythology, but we have to admit it. And we're like in this, I would do the two hands thing, but I got a mic in my hand. The see no evil, hear no evil thing on Apple devices. For the last 2.5 years, if all the, and I know you don't deal a lot with browsers, but at least on the browser side of things, Apple's been offline. That's 50% of users in the United States that are not targetable, yet we're all pretending like we're still getting those people.
Yeah, so I want to be it's weird to be the controversial guy saying what I'm about to say, but I actually think we would be better off if we were serving the right ads to the right people at the right time. And I say this as my joke about this. I am an in-market auto intender. All I want is my television to tell me the type of minivan to buy. I am paralyzed by choice. I am a low information decision maker here. I need to know which one to get. I don't know which one to get. I am shouting into the void like, TV, tell me what to buy here. And all it shows me is ads for dating sites that are starting to corrode my marriage based on the degree to which they're showing up, and like very niche dating sites that are contradictory to each other. So I know it's a targeting problem, but my wife doesn't know ad tech, so she's just looking at me like, what are you doing on your phone that they're showing me this? And I'm like, I don't know, I'm telling the phone I want a minivan. It's very family friendly. They're just not showing me the ad. So I understand all of this about data quality, but I also know that we need to come to a place where, I don't want to show everybody the same ad. I don't want to show everybody an ad that creeps them out where it's like talking to you and saying, hey, David, I think you should buy this minivan. There's some happy in the middle where we're kind of getting it right, where we're getting closer to the audience, because that makes the viewers happier. Like, they want to see relevant advertising that helps them solve a problem, that tells them a story they're interested in. But that we need to do it in a way where, to your point, where more of that working media is going to the publisher, where more of it is getting to the right audiences, and when all of it is obfuscated in the middle, when, the data sets are unreliable a lot of times, when they're probabilistically accurate but not so great, that's when we get into trouble.
I can plus one that. I mean, I don't think that any of us are advocating not for targeting, but I think that we've gotten this false sense of believability around the one-to-oneness that just isn't true. But I also agree it would be better if you weren't getting those dating site ads.
Well, see, do they need to know that, like, David wants a minivan, or just like someone who travels a lot, has dogs, kids, pets within a certain age range, like, might like a minivan. Like, do they need to know it's you?
I don't know if they need to know it's me, but the way that they're figuring out who needs a minivan isn't hitting me. So,
What is your online persona?
My son needs to go watch YouTube in your house, and then I promise you,
he's getting minivan ads.
No, he gets Porsche ads. But I could ask him for a fee. He'll search for minivans.
All I get are Grammarly ads on YouTube. I don't know what that says about my writing.
Another bit, like, we talk about how third-party data was helping us, find mass reach, mass scale. We sort of talked about that it was cheap and plentiful, but you're right, it wasn't totally cheap. Like, was it impactful? The thing we were chatting about over coffee this morning is, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, I was doing data pricing at my former company, and we celebrated the milestone when our data fees at our DSP exceeded our platform fees. Like, bonkers. Like, what?
Bonkers. Yes. Bonkers.
Yeah. Like, what? So third-party data. What about first-party data?
So, look, I'll go back to the happy meeting because I totally agree with you. I think that as a person, not as an ad tech leader, not as somebody who understands our industry, but as a human being, when I interact with a company, when I, become a fan of the New York Times and subscribe, or I'm a pilot, so I like Garmin. Well, some people have issues with Garmin. I like Garmin. I don't mind that those companies that I have a relationship with, and I think that, I hope most folks in this audience would say, like, as long as I have some control over that, I'm reasonably comfortable saying, hey, New York Times, I understand that my subscription costs this because it's being supplemented with ads. And Vox Media I don't pay for, but it's all ads. Or you guys, I love some of your content's great, and I don't pay for that. Mm-hmm. And I get it, and I'm cool with saying to my friend Paul here, you could take some of what you learn about me and use it to deliver me a minivan ad as opposed to a dating site ad. I think so. I'm generally a fan of this notion that the direct relationship can be, that the user can have a choice about that direct relationship, and that the entity with whom the user has a direct relationship should be permission to use that data as appropriate to deliver a relevant ad.
I think the word appropriate and David said creepy, I think are really important words though, because I think that in some cases, even with first party data, just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should. I am a United frequent flyer, and they have these programs called MilePlay where if you fly a few times in a certain window, you get bonus miles. So in my United app, I signed up for one, and it was fly 3 times before June 30th of last year, and you get whatever miles. And so fine. And then I was on Facebook 2 weeks later and literally saw my status in that program on Facebook. And I'm like, they must have used custom audiences, which is effectively a clean room, to push that data through. So it's effectively first party data being used in a privacy safe way. And I was totally creeped out. Like, how does Facebook know what I'm doing in this miles program? Like, it seems so odd to me. So it's how do you, I think how do you do it responsibly, do it in appropriate ways, do it in ways that are not creepy? Because I think that's also what gets the industry in more and more trouble, where regulators and whoever else want to legislate more and block more things, because it's if users don't feel good about it, it's not going to work.
At least for us, we're actually in a different position than web publishers, and not us, but our customers or our clients are, because the majority of the content we show is authenticated either through an MVPD login or through somebody's first-party relationship with an app, because you've signed up through, a credit card. You have to pay for video a lot of times, so Peacock, Max, all of those things. And so they do have that, and usually when you are signing up, they ask you if it's allowed to be used for advertising, or if you're buying an ad-supported plan, it's sort of implied that you can use some of that data there. That's why you pay less for it. But the challenge that our publishers face, and this is something I think as an industry we need to really grapple with, is that on the demand side, they would say, cool, just send me everything you know about this person and I'll decide if I want them. And that's not really how a publisher feels that they can use that data appropriately. Yeah. From a business perspective, it's not right. But also the user has put trust in that publisher to maintain some degree of privacy in how they're using it, and they really need to be able to protect that. And the challenge is coming to a place as an industry where buyers are okay activating on that data, which is exceptionally high quality data. You can do a lot with, sort of identifiable information that somebody has given you and given you permission to use, which is really different than what you can do with, hey, just pass some random IDs through and I'm going to impute whether you're a United frequent flyer. And the challenge is that in a DSP, people would rather click the buy some data button than go through what is, I'll call it the hassle or the conversation that needs to happen or the matching of how can I use your first party data by giving you my list and matching it in a clean way, rather than just saying, yeah, just pass me everything, I'll figure it out later when I'm hitting some checkboxes.
I think when I started, I said why I'm excited here. It's partly because I think we are at this moment now where we can embrace the change that is going to be forced upon us to change our behaviors. And I think that behavior of the buyer saying, oh, I'd just rather buy my third-party data in the DSP and suck it in your cookies or suck in your email addresses and make my own decisions, I think those days, we have to force them to be over. And that also goes back to your first-party data question, is the advertiser has a valuable trove of first-party relationships in their own data about the consumer. The publisher has them. And those two parties at the edges of the supply chain now have a higher degree not only of responsibility, but they have an economic reason not to take that data and just throw it out into the middle of the vast ad tech maze that's going to then take all that data and do their own thing with it. So I think that the value of matchable first-party data that stays in the first party is actually incredibly important and something we have to design for.
What about these, new identifiers that sort of take those first-party identifiers, email addresses, translate them into something else to
lipstick on a pig.
Okay, to act as a transactable element that we use third-party cookies for. Paul, from the publisher perspective, what are your thoughts?
We all this industry since its inception has been built on things that we all knew would only last a couple of years, and we keep doing it. We keep building new technology, knowing that knowing or not knowing that it's only going to last 3 or 4 years. I think this is a case of similar stuff, for good or for bad. Partly because it continues to make it easy. The ideas of whether they're deterministic or probabilistic or whatever, it makes it easy for people to say check boxes and get the people that they want and know what's working, rather than completely throwing everything out and starting over again. So, my opinion almost doesn't matter. Clearly they're out in the world. Clearly they are a component of what people are going to be buying on. Clearly, big companies are investing a lot of them, and they're going to be a part of what the answer is. But I also don't think that they're going to stand the test of time, and they're going to go away in, whether it's 2, 3, 4, or 5 years, I don't know. But I think legislators and regulators are going to say that sort of thing is kind of just like cookies, if not worse in some cases.
Lipstick on a pig.
So,
the thing that I do think is different, if we get out of the sort of browser world, right? What was happening with cookies was, hey, I'm going to follow you everywhere, and I'm going to know all the sites you go to, and I'm going to be like, hey, you like looking at Rolexes, and so I'm going to show you Porsche ads. And there is something in these identifiers that's different. If the pig is the cookie, we're putting a lipstick on a different animal here. I really do think it's something novel in some ways. Everything goes away at some point in this industry. I just feel stupid every time I'm on a panel when I think back to what I said on a panel 4 years ago, and I realize how completely wrong I was about all of it. Just because it evolves so rapidly. If we think through the problems we're trying to solve for our customers, right? Marketers want to make sure that the people who see their ads are, even if they're not in market for the product now, it's building their brand, it's reaching the people that they want to reach, it's efficient use of their spend. Publishers want to be making as much money out of their assets in terms of their content and their relationships with their viewers or their audiences as they can. The things that we do in the middle need to be making it easier for both of those things to happen. And one of the things that we've done, right, we hacked the cookie. The cookie was a thing designed to kind of remember your login, and we hacked it to do all of these other things. Now we're saying, all right, we have this other stuff. We're going to hack it to get around legislative requirements or privacy requirements, but we're still just putting in layer upon layer of hack around the rules. the solutions need to be cleaner. A lot of those things are business process issues, not technology issues.
My negative comment on the shared or distributed IDs, and the reason I lovingly call it lipstick on a pig, is that what we've done is we've taken the fundamental third-party cookie and just put some encryption around it. Some of them are based on very private information, like email addresses, whereas cookies are sort of tied to a device. Cookies can be deleted. You can't delete your email address. So we've actually taken a step, in my view, a little backwards. It's great that we've got some encryption around it, but when every SSP and every DSP and anyone who pays a fee to LiveRamp, ID5 or UID2 can decrypt them, suddenly you've created an entirely new ecosystem of persistent non-private identity that has the same side effects that we've had.
Yeah, I completely agree about that. Yep.
I think the challenge that we have right now, and again, it's this, like, we either embrace the challenge and build for it and redesign for it, or we just punt it down the field another couple of years. To your point, they will eventually disappear. The challenge we have is how do we deliver the relevance? How do we learn that this person might be in market for the minivan, or how do we not give them the dating site ads, but without taking the valuable data that a publisher has earned from the consumer, or the valuable data the advertiser has earned from the consumer, and throw it into the middle in a way that's going to just subject it to abuse. That to me is, I think, that's the crux.
Another thing that has been a hot topic, as we talk about precision and targeting, it also makes me think of, like, a CMO's job isn't just to, be creative and get right user, right ad, get you that minivan ad that you were just so desperately trying to get. But it's also
by the end of this thing, with all our phones on and hearing the word minivan, he's going to finally get his minivan.
This is my third panel for saying it. Everybody thinks their phone is listening. If their phone was listening, I'd have a minivan.
So CMOs are held accountable to outcomes, right? So not just minivans, but like actually selling it. How many minivans got sold as a result of these things? So it's measurement, it's attribution, it's ROI calculation. That's another reason why we need identity. And I feel like clean rooms have kind of cropped up as a solution for enabling that, what's that clever phrase, like collaboration without commingling? I think that's trademarked.
Or it should be.
Yeah. Is that, like, are clean rooms the answer to our woes? Is that going to help? Is that the panacea for all targeting addressability measurement problems?
So I don't think there's a panacea. I don't know what the answer is. What I think is really exciting right now is that we're coming up with new solutions and novel solutions. So at least in our space, I don't know, we had like 1.5, maybe 2 measurement providers for decades, and now there's a half dozen, maybe more, that are sort of out there trying to come up with new ways to do things using big data. The way that you sort of target, a lot of the targeting data we used was direct mail stuff that we sort of ported over and replaced your address with a cookie. We're starting to innovate in there. So the interesting thing right now is, among my stupid things I've said on a panel 4 years ago, I said, I think we've hit like peak complexity and we're going to start to unify everything. Famous last words, right? That was like the day the inflection point went the other direction.
The other famous last word is future-proof.
Yes.
Yeah. How many times have you heard that?
There's no panacea.
Bullshit.
All of these things that we are talking about, I think, are laying the groundwork for the innovation from 4 years from now. But it's also like in these periods of disruption where we move off of the thing we've been doing this whole time, or when we get really interesting innovation out of it. And so that's what I think is coming out right now. It's hard for me to predict, like, this is the thing that will happen, but we're breaking apart so many parts of it. We're breaking apart planning at the beginning of it. We're breaking apart the targeting and how we're going to get things in there. We've got all of these little pockets that sort of work differently for all of that. We're breaking apart measurement. We have all these pockets that sort of work differently. The end-to-end chain is still really disconnected. It's going to be a little bit fragmented for a little bit longer. Maybe one day it'll come back together. Maybe I'm going to be talking about how I said that in 4 years and feeling really stupid again. But it is like the number of new ways to do these things is really exciting.
You asked the question, what do we think about clean rooms? I'm not going to be so contrarian on this one. I actually think clean rooms are the concept of the clean room is something very important for privacy and data protection. And it's great for publishers and advertisers who are very large and very sophisticated and have big budgets. Clean room is a viable solution. Several publishers, including NBC, sister company to Freewheel, are successfully implementing and operating clean rooms for targeting, frequency capping, and measurement with their top 10 to 15, maybe 20 largest brand buyers. But what our publishers tell us is that when you start to get, if you're a very, very large and sophisticated publisher that can afford this, you get to advertiser 21 through 10,000 and the whole clean room environment falls apart. And then publishers like you guys, you guys are huge. Raptive is an incredibly large, successful company, and I don't know, you're not using a clean room, right?
We do a little bit. We have enough scale where we can use them
For the same
top
thing.
5 advertisers, maybe. Like it's small numbers, but yeah.
So I think my view on clean rooms is great solution for privacy and data protection, but for a very, very small number of companies. We don't have a really great answer yet for the rest of the open web from a publisher point of view, and for all the advertisers, even large or small, that just aren't spending hundreds of millions of dollars with a particular publishing brand.
I do think what David said, though, is that this David is a really, your point's really good too. This David's point is really good.
Thank you. I appreciate
because
that.
It is exciting that
insecure.
there are lots of companies building cool new things. I'm like, we talk about like the patchwork quilt. Like there's no single solution that replaces cookies or maids or other ID things or whatever. It's a whole batch of different things, and like some will stand the test of time, some won't. Some new things will pop up, whether it's for targeting or measurement or different parts. And it is exciting that there are companies actually appearing that are trying new things and trying new approaches, and many will fail, but some will succeed and will push us forward. And clean rooms, I agree, are part of the answer, but I think it's it's 20% of the answer or something, and what are the pieces that are going to fill in the other 80% for everyone?
So I'm going to get on a little soapbox here. So we've talked a lot about precision and like, do we need to know end users and stuff? Like, do we need to have that granularity? We've touched on data regulation. Like that's this, it doesn't, from a security perspective, data regulation doesn't really keep me up at night because we've got legitimate interest carve-outs where security vendors are able to still gather requisite signal. I say signal a lot in my day-to-day, so it like seems like such a second nature to me. Signal is just lots of little innocuous bits of information about user behavior, network signals, application signals. All of that goes into big algorithms to find fraud and abuse, to stop credit card information from being stolen. But we are now seeing a lot of privacy restrictions from OEM-based, from publishers, from tech providers, just cutting things off at the knees, obfuscating it to protect the user privacy. I worry about this.
I'll take this one. So Google threw out an idea a couple years ago called Flock, federated learning of cohorts, and the concept had a lot of flaws to it, and it was also run by Google and only Google environments, which has, in my view, a very big flaw to it. But the concept was, for most targeting, measurement, attribution, frequency cap, like all the things that we've talked about so far, you don't actually need to know the person. You need to know that the people you're targeting are in your group. The results were at a group level working for you. And if you really step back from Google's own product, I've been troubled to figure out a use case where you, other than maybe yours, because you guys do have the need to have that sort of very granular level of signaling, to use your phrase. But outside of a very few use cases, I think the notion of the group can work, particularly if we can figure out how to preserve this dynamic that we've all become accustomed to of the advertiser being the selector of the group. It's their ad money. It's their ad budgets. And so the advertiser being able to say, this is the group I want to target. It's my loyalty card users. It's my frequent travelers. It's people who abandon their shopping cart. But I don't need to know it was David that abandoned his shopping cart. I just need to know that people who did saw this campaign. People who search for minivans get the minivan ad.
Yeah, I struggle with this one. I think we should, the like happy secret or whatever around a lot of this obfuscation is that many of the moves that people who have a very close relationship with the consumer make that are purportedly to be about privacy are also business decisions, where when you decide to protect your identifier and not share it with anyone, you also have knowledge that other people don't have, and that knowledge is power. And so oftentimes...
But that's not bad. I mean, that actually, I don't mean to interrupt you, but the publisher who has the relationship should have power, and the advertiser who has the relationship should have power.
I think that's true, but the challenge is that the publisher who has the relationship and the device manufacturer are different people. And in that Google example where it is built completely into Google technology, it obfuscates away the publisher that has a direct relationship with that customer, and it says, actually, no, the important thing is the browser, or the important thing is the phone, or the important thing is the TV. The publisher and your content, you are just a way to get eyeballs onto my TV, and I will be the one who owns identity information. I will protect my users' privacy, and I will make sure the only safe way to do that is through my environment. And I don't know if that's necessarily the best thing for publishers, consumers, or even these device manufacturers necessarily either.
For the record, totally agree with you. That is the flaw among many of Flock. And so 100%, it's not the device manufacturer. No one in the middle. And when I say the middle, I think of the edges as the advertiser who owns that customer relationship and the publisher that owns that customer relationship. That's where the data protection responsibility should lie. And frankly, we should have more symmetry between the power and value that those two parties bring to the table as opposed to all the power in the middle. So I wholeheartedly agree with you.
David, I liked your point about it's almost like the weaponization of user data, to give it that, to have a secret sauce where you have to go there.
Yeah, and there's like a lot of legitimate reasons. There are regulatory reasons. You definitely want to respect user privacy. You want to be really thoughtful about how you make that information available. I don't think anyone would design a system today like where I just put cookies out there and let everyone do whatever they want. And it's about coming up with these solutions for it. I agree from an ad targeting perspective. So what we do is we separate out the concept of identity and audience. So identity is, this is David. This is information I know about David. This is how I can validate who he is and connect him to an email address or a maid or a phone number, which is actually really useful for things like, hey, I don't want to show you the same ad 15 times just because you changed rooms in your house. There's audience data, which is David's in the market for a minivan. We don't really, you need the two of them to match them together, but most advertisers, what they actually want is the audience data, not the identity data.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think the group point is kind of the point there where it's like I agree with both Davids again, that I think that in the case of, your two examples, like for the targeting, like you don't care about David, you care about the fact that you've got 2,700 minivan intenders and how do you reach them, so.
Yeah. All right, let's pause for any questions, thoughts, comments, burning desires.
Testing.
Thank you. I'm Eric. David, I have a question for you on the right side. What is the percentage of people you mentioned initially as being people who were actually waiting for TV to come and give them an answer?
So I don't know if anyone's done research to say like, hey, do you have specific products you're in the market for and you need advertising to teach you those? But I think that when advertising works really well, and again, like I'm on the tech side, not the creative side, you'll get better answers over there. When it works really well, it tells you a story that connects you to products that you would like to buy or like to be affiliated with. And I think most people who are watching ad-supported content understand that part of how they are getting this content at a lower price or free is because they're consuming some sort of ads, and those ads are educational in some way about what a brand stands for or what it is. I don't think everybody's as direct about it as I am to say, I am in the market for this. But I do think that when there's a really good connection in there, people would much prefer to see advertisements about products that they're interested in than products that are irrelevant to them.
Sure. Okay. Actually, an approach I hadn't seen before, because I'm more proactive in my own researches rather than waiting for for proposal of consumer goods and so on. So it makes a bit of a difference. But
there just to comment, there's an overwhelming body of research that suggests strongly that consumers do recognize that advertising is the quid pro quo and would much prefer relevant advertising. But they also, in the same research, feel that we've crossed lines. And so if we could pull it back a little bit, we give you the minivan without making you feel creeped out.
I say that in a glib way. Like, this is a 5-figure significant purchase. I'm going to do more than 30-second spots of research before I make that purpose. But auto-intender is also the category everybody uses, and I'm very clearly in market and not getting it, and that's sort of why it's relevant in here. My other one that I use is if you show me a Domino's pizza ad in the taxi cab at 2 in the morning, I live down the street from one, and I was probably going to get one on my way home. It was a very effective form of advertising.
Okay, and right now it's pushing ads to someone, and how about users become the actors of the ads they get? It's more like today, if you access a site, you say, okay, I'm open for cookies or whatever it is, but then again, you don't know how it's going to direct their feedback. You were mentioning that you were getting things that had no relationships to what you actually pushed inside there. And what frustrates me a little bit like you is that you go in, you're looking for something. Yes, you're actually happy you get some ads that are related to your research, but obviously you're pissed off when you get something that's completely different and not accurate and facing what you have. So is there something you're looking at that will be helping people be definite actors of what the outcome of their research will be?
So I think the challenge for an advertiser, and look, like as tech people, we get up here and we talk about the privacy and data and identity, but the challenge, the problem an advertiser is trying to solve is to get people who are unaware of their product or unaware of the features of their product to understand it better and eventually make a purchase of it. And so the people they're trying to reach with advertising are not people who know about the product, are purchase intenders, and are going and doing a ton of research about it. That's a part of it, but you almost get further down in the funnel into sales there. What you're looking for often with advertising is people who don't know about me that I want to make aware, people who don't know aspects of my product that I want to make aware. And so those people are not going to self-select in because they're unaware of it or they're unaware of the need, and you're trying to generate demand. And oftentimes for many products, you're trying to generate demand long before the actual purchase is made. So those Porsche ads aren't totally wasted. If one day your son is wealthy enough to afford a Porsche, right, they're like
From
trading
your mouth
now.
to God's
yeah,
ears.
so like, he's not in market for Porsches today, but you're building a brand over years and over a long period of time to build a sustainable asset. And often a part of that just requires you to interact with people that are not immediately in market for your product or don't know about it.
Any?
Sarah.
So, quick question for the group overall, because I can definitely resonate with the thought about identity and knowing the audience versus the segment that they're in. But equally, what do you think that a publisher being a steward of the data that they have, being high caliber, and an advertiser that wants to self-select, how is that line going to actually get drawn and done properly? Knowing that as an industry, we seem to not be self-regulating properly given the fact that creepy is coming up on every single panel.
And it's kind of funny, I do sadly think regulation and more of it is probably the answer in some cases. I think regulation to date has mostly been focused on data protection, which is like a component of privacy, but I think there may be ground something for the point of like creepiness, which obviously isn't like a legal term of any sort, but like how do we make it so the experience is actually better and done so in a way where people don't even if the data is private, but it's creepy, it's still not good. And so how do you fix fix the first problem first, and then how do we move to the second problem and make sure we're doing a better job there too. But I agree with you. I'm not sure. Maybe we'll get there, but we have not proven ourselves always to be doing that.
I think one challenge is that creepy is subjective, and one person's creepy is another person's relevant. A friend of mine is a professor, and he teaches an NYU course, and he asked all of his students about privacy and advertising, and he sort of ran some scenarios by them. And all of his scenarios where he's like, this is too far, it would gross me out, they were like, I want that one. It's interesting because people talk about the effectiveness of Instagram ads, especially for your sort of early customer adoption, as like it just knows me and it shows me what I want to buy. In other environments, you might say that creepy, it's super effective in a lot of cases too. So creepy is not a legislative term. You can't just say don't do creepy because it means different things to different people. I think what people are trying to do, including a lot of tech providers, or the big ones or most of them, is to be responsible. And to say, use sort of the logic of, if my customer found out I was doing this, how, would they be okay with it? Will I continue to maintain that trust with them that they've sort of given to me here? And how can I keep that trust? I think that a lot of the big players that we're working with are really trying to do that and explore that. And look, I work for a giant corporation. We have very sophisticated, very conservative privacy lawyers that help us stay out of trouble, that are looking at the regulatory environment, but also looking at what's the right thing for our brand and our business to make sure to do. And I think a lot of other large companies are doing the same thing.
I have a proposed answer to the creepy question because of the subjectivity to it. If publishers, Raptive or otherwise, were to sustain the firewall around their personal data, and advertisers, like our friends at J&J, for example, would keep the firewall around their personal data, then each consumer could decide, oh, it's a little creepy when that drug from Johnson & Johnson is following me on the internet, and I can opt out. And because my data that J&J knows about me was always at J&J, when I opt out because I found it a little too creepy, it's effective. And the same thing on the publisher side. If the publisher's serving me ads that I feel are a little too personal, I can exercise my choice. The problem we have in our industry right now is that the toothpaste gets let out of the tube and you can't get it back in. Whether it's the cookie, whether it's a shared email address, or whether it's a new gen shared or distributed ID infrastructure, once you let the cat out of the bag, once your data is in the ecosystem, it's really hard for each individual to choose when they're okay with it and when they're not. So I think the answer to your question is you can't legislate it. You can't determine for everybody what's creepy and what's not. I think your professor probably, it's right. It's very subjective. But if we move to a world where the data stays where it started and we use other technology to enable the match without throwing it out into the ecosystem, I think we can find that we'll naturally be able to tune the utility creepy factor to the right balance for each individual and keep the power and the value within the publishers and the advertisers instead of the middle. And I say that, by the way, being a middleman. We are an SSP. We sit in the middle, and we're advocating for pushing out the value and the control to the publisher and the advertiser.
Cool. Thank you.
Q here.
Afternoon. Thank you so much. My name is Will Harmon from...
Just closer to your... Closer.
Hello? No?
Yeah,
They're working.
yeah.
Will Harmon. So I'm from a European company called UTIC, which is a telco platform. I've got a question for you about... I've been to a lot of these events at Cannes talking about identity and privacy. Do you think there's an irony that actually the majority of buying of media is actually taking place on platforms that are scaled, that are based on people who've authenticated and logged in, extensive profiles and tracking, and yet our entire focus on an industry is on solving the problems on your open web internet, but actually we don't seem to be solving the problem about how much harm consumers can face by having their lives tracked to a very high degree of precision on what we call the walled gardens. And when you look at the growth areas, things like retail media, we talk about identity, it's your email address with your entire purchase history being attached to it, which is now being used by advertisers, but that's a massive area for growth. And I'm concerned when we talk about this topic that we focus on you guys on the open web, but we don't really seem to be doing anything about privacy, where I think consumers potentially face the most harm, which is in these walled gardens and what happens when they behave badly, when they behave recklessly, or they behave stupidly. And you can see the GDPR fines we've had in Europe. We've got really strong evidence they've done all three.
I'm going to jump in on this one because it's a passion point of mine. First of all, I agree with you. We're talking very much about the open web here because every bit of privacy legislation has differentiated rules around the use of data in first party and the use of data in the third party. And the platforms are all first party. And so there's this sort of side effect that nobody's really talking about, that all this great stuff that we're doing, whether it's in GDPR land here in Europe or in California or any of the other, I think, 9 states at this point, is largely favoring or benefiting the large platforms who have scaled first-party audiences, and it's a shame. From a legislative perspective, there's very little at this point that we can do other than enforce that if a user makes a choice, that choice should be adhered to, whether it's in first-party or third-party. To give you a sense of dollars, in the United States last year, in 2022, the IAB said that there was $125 billion of indirect programmatic spend. But about 80 billion of the 125 was in Google, Meta, Instagram and Meta and Facebook, Pinterest, we talked about that, et cetera. Those are all, that's the lion's share spend is actually not being legislated at this point. I think it's a huge problem. I don't have a really good answer for it, other than it's a serious problem.
Can I just one point? European legislation makes no differentiation between first party and third party. What actually is the issue is if you're logged into an environment, it's a technical challenge, right? If you're logged into an environment, you can stitch that entire thing together. And of course, these guys have massive platforms with huge logged in environments. But actually, from a privacy and legal point of view, a third-party cookie and an email address is considered equivalent personal data.
Right. I would. One thing we say, like, we work with a lot of small and mid-sized publishers. I would say almost all regulation and all privacy trends advantage very large over very small. Like every single time, it's true. And so we push back on that and try to figure out ways that you can do things on the small side that are more private. I think to your point, and you probably know more about it than I do, but I do think the Digital Markets Act and the Digital Services Act, I think, are a good step in the right direction. They don't get to where you're talking about, but I think things like that do differentiate the very large and treat them differently and put different regulations on them, I think is a really good thing to do.
Cool. Awesome. I don't know about you guys. I'm officially melting. So I think it might be time to call it a day. Thank you so much for your time, your expertise.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks very much.
I want to just say a thank you. Sarah, who's with the mic, and Rachel, who's holding up that, she's waving, did a lot of the arrangements here. Can we just give them a round of applause for putting it all together and enjoy a little bit of smoked salmon and finger food. Thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.